And a very warm welcome. You're in tune to the Art of Living on Cross Rhythms 96.3 FM, community radio for Plymouth. And it's my joy with the Art of Living to have a fireside chat with those men and women who have played a significant role in churches or Christian organizations. A young couple who've been around a few years, and actually they had a lot to do in Plymouth, where we record the shows in the early years. Noel and Tricia Richards, good to have you with us, guys.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us, and we're also not only just doing radio now, but we've sort of progressed to doing vodcasts as well. So there's a bit of filming going on as well. But like I normally ask our guests when we introduce them this program, tell us a little bit of how you both came to faith, because you've been married how many years?
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot.
45, I think it is.
Yeah, 45.
How many?
45 years.
Wow, there you go. And still going strong?
Yeah.
I love the cover of your music with when you both, that was 45 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, we've been writing all this time.
For longer than that. I think that was how we got together, was through the writing of songs. So.
And you're well known for your musicianship, and you're doing poetry as well, Tricia, but you've been on the Christian music worship scene for decades. But anyway, let's get back. Tell us your story about faith.
Well, for me, I actually, I'm a Plymouth girl, born in Plymouth, and my maiden name was Trethowan, so my heritage is Cornish even. And I was brought up with very loving parents, brothers and sisters. My mother went to the Methodist Church, and I would go to Sunday school. But my father was not a believer at all, so there was no pressure. I think I always had an awareness of God. I was curious, and I enjoyed the singing in the church, so I would go to sing the hymns. I was actually asked to leave the choir because I sang too loud, and I didn't understand musicality and sang harmonies when there weren't any. But my faith really was sort of simmering. And when I was in junior school, one of my lovely teachers ran a good news club after school, and would have people come and give their testimonies. And I went along, and so would hear people talking about their faith in Jesus and their stories. And it was also at the time when various musicals were coming along. Come Together was also coming onto the scene. Well, I made a commitment to Christ at one of those meetings, and but it was there was also, I think it was Power for Life. There was quite a lot going on in Plymouth at that time, and I would sort of tip up at all these events, and eventually found myself with a group of young Christian friends who, like myself, were born again and hungry for that connection and faith. And it really sort of went on from there until we all became involved in a youth church on Plymouth Barbican.
Yep. And we got some friends that we were with yesterday who remember those days. What about yourself, Noel?
Yeah, well, mine was completely different. Growing up in South Wales, in a very, I would say, religious community. Most of the villages in South Wales had a sort of Pentecostal chapel of sorts. And so my background was an Assemblies of God Pentecostal church, very legalistic and very superstitious. And I'm really glad that I left all of that. But good parents. My mum actually is still alive. She will be 93 in September. But wonderful parents who put a lot of good stuff into me. And so I had an awareness of God, from an early age. But it was when I was 15 that was the turning point for me, when we had a young guy come to be the pastor of our church. His name is John Glass. And he went on to lead the Elim Pentecostal movement. And he became my mentor, really. And I owed so much to him because he basically discipled me and, encouraged me in music, because he was a guitar player himself. And I think that was a turning point for me. I realized that here was somebody who had life. This wasn't legalism. And so 15 really was a turning point for me when I guess I really started on my journey as a real follower of Christ, not just, doing the church thing. And I'm grateful for all of that. I went to my first Christian concert. John Glass took me to that, and that changed my life forever.
He was great, John Glass, because I think he, at the time, the dealings Kerry and I had with him, he was deeply relational, and that's where he wanted to take Elam at the time into relationship. But we're going to be back with Noel and Tricia right after this. And if you've just tuned in, a very warm welcome to The Art of Living on Cross Rhythms. That song that you're listening to is a new project that Noel and Tricia have produced. It's called Still Dreaming. And we're going to, through the program, obviously, with the amazing amount of music that Noel and Tricia produced over the years, be filling in on this program all Noel and Tricia Richard's songs. So we start with that. Still Dreaming. Inspiration, guys?
Well, I think we've got to a certain age when there's less years in front of us than there are behind us, but that is still important to keep moving forward, keep looking forward. And a lot of people think because we live in Spain, we've retired. But you never retire from being creative or dreaming or still hoping. And I think that's part of the inspiration behind it. And knowing that life can still surprise you. You can still keep looking forward, and events and circumstances can change, and that can be good.
Yeah, and we address the kind of idea in the song that we were young, we had lots of great ideas, we had ambition, we had hopes for the future, and then we ask the question, where does the passion go?
Yeah.
Because as we get older and we take the knocks in life, then we can become discouraged. Our circumstances can become a bit of a straitjacket to stop us from dreaming, to stop us from expecting something wonderful that can happen in the future. So we just really want to encourage people of our own age just to keep looking forward. And yes, we're grateful for the past, but there is more to come. And a friend of ours says there's always time for one more adventure. And no matter what age you are, let's keep looking for those adventures. I love reading obituaries about people who have had some interesting lives.
Yeah.
It's fascinating when you think what people have done and the circumstances, and there's just the chance meetings that have changed people's lives. So we just want people to keep expecting that, we can keep moving forward, and we can still, the best is yet to come. That's what I believe.
Well, even when we pop our clogs, that's what we do hope, isn't it? The best is yet to come. But Friends on Adventure, Bilbo Baggins, Lord of the Rings, it's kind of that artistic, creative stuff. I know that you're into poetry, Tricia, but in many ways, guys, we kind of started out, I mean, when we look back at the 80s, late 70s, 80s, the Jesus People movement, it was a profound revival in the Western world that the contemporary Christian music, worship music, this really was the genesis of your ministry for decades, weren't you? Worship leading, and you've done stadiums. We know, Noel, in the past in Europe and stuff. But the heart of creativity, art, and that Jesus People movement, was that, did you feel it was you were part of a revival back then?
We didn't use the revival word. No. I think, yes, there were a lot less sort of catchphrases then. We just felt, I remember becoming a Christian, discovering Jesus, waking up every day, hungry to read the Bible, hungry to learn, just excited to be with a group of people who had also discovered faith. I think it was, just a different. There wasn't the revival word. It was just like we thought, oh, we're going to be the generation that sees Jesus return.
Yeah.
Definitely, that was much more in our thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think we watched recently. We watched the Jesus Revolution movie, and we had the opportunity to see it. And I love the idea. You know, all these young people who basically are saying, you know, we're going to be different. Yeah. We're going to change the world.
Yeah.
And we know that so many lives were changed during those late 60s, early 70s. And in Plymouth, we did have some of those Calvary Chapel groups.
Yes, visit.
Come across and do concerts in the YMCA.
Yeah.
Is the YMCA still there, Chris?
Yeah, it's still going. It's still going. Yeah, and absolutely.
Those were fantastic concerts with some of those guys. But I do remember a few years later saying to somebody, I'd love to go to Calvary Chapel and see what's happening there. And basically it all changed. They'd settled down.
Yeah.
They got married, they'd had kids, they got mortgages.
Yeah.
And the revolutionaries were no longer revolutionaries.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism at all.
No.
That's the stuff of life. But it was just great to see the movie and to think, oh yeah, we were young, we were carefree, we were wild. We were pretty wild down in Plymouth back in those days.
You were. I'm going to allude to that later on, but it's how do you, you know, you might be in your 70s, one is in the 70s, but in faith can give you a sense you're still 18. Kind of external, isn't it, really? And I think you guys carry that as a sense like the outward sort of gets a little bit older in time, but for the eternal perspective, I'm still 18. We'll be back with Noel and Tricia right after this.
As the last sun sets for me, and the hush of the endless night consumes, it really will be fine. Know that I will be at peace, and everything that you and I have shared is wrapped up in the past.
And this is, of course, the Art of Living on Cross Rhythms, 96.3 FM. Certainly hope I'm naming the program correctly. As I get older, I forget what I'm doing sometimes. But I do know I'm in the studio, fireside chat, with Noel and Tricia Richards, who have been around a long, long time, as they said. They've admitted it, 45 years of marriage. That's pretty wonderful. They got married very young. But you were both in the Bethel Church in the late 70s, 80s. I think Alec McLeod was a real leader in that movement. Architects Design Group, students and people finding faith, and really an exciting time. Was that really the genesis of what you were thinking musically? No?
Well, in those days, you know, we thought if we could basically just do concerts, we'd be very happy. I think our ambition in those days was maybe one day we could play at the Royal Albert Hall, and then we will have really made it as musicians and singers, because, you know, there were some Christian events happening in the Royal Albert Hall. And we thought if we could, one day be involved in something like that, that would be fantastic. We never dreamed that our music would take us to so many different countries and playing not just in the Royal Albert Hall, but, you know, stadiums and on television, you know, to tens of thousands of people, and it's just amazing. We could never have imagined that. We were very happy in Plymouth, Trish, weren't we?
Yeah, we loved Plymouth. Imagined we'd stay there all our lives, and I think actually what we've often said is we became accidental worship leaders, because that phrase didn't even exist. Worship leader. We were just the people with guitars who liked to sing. And so...
But back then, you'd remember this probably, Trish, because, you know, Methodist, the pun was that it'll take every year you move the piano an inch across you know. But the whole thing about the Jesus People movement with us with contemporary Christian music was contemporary music. The church was getting into using percussion, guitars and stuff. It was a bit of a culture shock, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and we basically, because we were starting from scratch, we basically had a small band leading worship because Trish played guitar, I played guitar.
I think everybody played the guitar. So, we'd have this huge tune-up of 12 guitars before we started because everybody was included. Everybody was involved. It was
and it was pretty organic. We weren't trying to make something happen. I do remember being at a youth conference at a place called Kelly College in
Tavistock. Yep.
And there was a guy called Bob Pitcher who was leading from the piano.
Yeah.
And we all stood around with our guitars.
Yeah.
And I think there was a song that was going around at that time. I'm not sure where it came from, because it's called Sing and Rejoice, O Daughter of Zion. I mean, really archaic language. But we sang that song to death over the weekend.
Yeah.
And we just all stood around this grand piano with Bob singing at the top of his voice. But it wasn't about lights and smoke machines and set lists and all of that. And the thing is, there is a place for all of that. So that's not a criticism. I think it's great that we can be creative. If you look at the Old Testament, they definitely had smoke machines with all the incense and stuff like that. Yeah. And they dressed in their stage clothes, their fine robes. But in those days, it was very hit and miss, and it was fun. And I think we mustn't lose that sense of adventure when we come together to worship.
Yeah.
So as a couple, married, family, everything else, how important has your ministry together been? Because you do a lot of poetry, Tricia, but you do a lot of singing. You written a few of the songs yourself, haven't you?
Yes. And the funny thing is that I guess I don't, we never sort of separated it like I was writing poetry. I think naturally Noel has always been the more competent musician, and also he comes up with the hook lines musically. But I'd often go, oh, I've got some words for that. So a lot of the poems, I think a classic would be By Your Side. That started life as a poem. Words that I'd written, and I can remember Noel playing this hook music and thinking, I've got that, and then we'd come together and we'd hone it. So some poems have gone the way to become songs. But yes, I've always written. I think that's always been jotting words down.
I got to say, Trista, that we know Steve Wheeler, who Kerry mentions in Got a Guy to Live, with Mark II. He was quite a revolutionary at the time in terms, but he's doing a massive ministry on poetry right now. It's absolutely amazing. And he's never lost that creative zeal. No. I mean, he went into academia, but he's still like Mark II fronting type of the music. And there's something, I don't know whether it's a deposit that God gave, but there's a lot of people with our length of time on the planet who are still quite vibrantly young out of that season. When we stop for some more music now and come back, let me ask you what you see spiritually, prophetically for the times that we're in, and your ministry and what you're endeavoring to do. We'll be back right after this.
And still they travel on. Oh, still searching for a home.
And this is the Art of Living on Cross Rhythms 96.3 FM. Fireside chat with Noel and Tricia Richards. Actually, a really well-known name, Richards, in terms of contemporary music and everything else. And in Plymouth, obviously homegrown. A lot of history in Plymouth for Noel and Tricia. But guys, your inspiration for 45 plus years, you get married 45 years ago and you're still doing the same thing. Inspiration, what do you see? You've got to have a vision to keep going.
No.
Yeah. Well, somebody, a good friend of ours, said a few years ago that maybe, we've been writing hymns for the church for so long, that maybe now we need to write hymns for people, whether they're inside the church or outside the church.
People on a journey.
Yeah.
of belief.
So I look at some of the songs that mainstream songs. I remember years ago watching a video of Robbie Williams at Nebworth and singing his song Angels. And I think it was well over 150,000 people there.
Incredible.
And they're all singing at the tops of their voices. It was like it was a hymn. And then I think of Freddie Mercury at Wembley Stadium singing "We Are the Champions" and 70,000 people singing that. "We are the champions." That was a hymn for that generation. And so for me, I'm thinking if we can continue to write songs that maybe will be hymns that people can sing, whether they have faith or don't have faith, but songs that are shot through with our faith, then that's what we'll continue to do. So we're looking, for an audience, if you like, people who will listen not just inside the church, but people outside the church as well. So that's affecting our writing and affecting the way we look at things.
And you travel the world with your ministry, especially to the States and Europe, and you do work in Eastern Europe. So you can have big concerts, little concerts, doesn't matter, does it? It's really...
No, it doesn't matter at all, to be honest with you. I always joke that we've played everything from couches to cathedrals.
Sofas to stadium.
Sofas to
There's
stadium.
a good song, Tricia. From couches to cathedrals, or cathedrals to couches.
Yeah. And, whether it's a handful of people in a front room, which is where we started off, and where we've actually done some concerts in recent years.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, I love those front room concerts. So we were doing a lot of those before the pandemic hit. We were doing house concerts. And they were great. We really enjoyed doing those. But also, it's just a wonderful privilege to play in front of tens of thousands, as I was able to do last summer in Hungary, when our good friend Victor, who leads a movement there called This Is the Day, finally was able to fill the national stadium with 40,000 people from around Central Europe. It was just an incredible day, and just a privilege just to go up there and sing for 20 minutes within that program. Yeah.
Do you see things bubbling over the years across the world? I mean, these are for every generation. If you were in the 30s or even in the 60s, the world goes through incredible times of stress and ebbs and flows. What do you see at the moment for a next generation? What do you think people are asking? Existential questions. Why am I here? What's it all about?
I think in most people's lives, people inside with faith, without faith, at some point in their lives, they usually ask those sort of questions. And I think, to be a part of their conversations is a privilege and an opportunity. A lot of people, that we've met since we moved to Spain are interested in God, and a lot of people aren't interested in God. They've sort of blocked God off in their sort of parents' religion. So they're like, well, we're not interested. We don't want to be part of predominantly a church. End of discussion. But round the dinner table, when they might say, well, so you write modern hymns, and you're like, yes, well, what do you, and discussions come up about God. And I think that there's much more opportunity for that. It's a real mix, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to think, Chris, that we are, becoming more open in the way that we think and approach different groups of people. I mean, it was interesting for us when we moved here. Some of our neighbors, because we live in an apartment block, some of our neighbors live for a few years and then they move on. We had a young Muslim couple living next door to us. He was playing for the local football team, a professional footballer. And we became really good friends with them. And yet, previous years living in the UK, we'd always see Islam as the enemy of our faith. And yet here we were sitting around the pool, Tricia, at times just saying, well, tell me, what do you believe? And tell me what your perspective is. Because I think if we dialogue and if we ask questions, then we'll find maybe some sort of common ground. I remember years ago being in a concert in Germany, a small concert in an optician's. They were celebrating, I think, 10 or 15 years of being in the local community. And so we did a small acoustic concert there. And I talked to a young guy all evening. And at the end of the evening, he said, well, Noel, it's been great to meet you. And, I'm a Muslim, you're a Christian. We both follow the same God, just different paths. And with that, he turned around and walked out the door. Yeah. And I was like just about to say, well, actually, I believe. And I thought, no, if he's got a heart after God, the Bible says, if you seek me, you will find me. Yeah. And then we had another neighbor who was, we would joke, he's totally into the new age. But he said, I'm not a Buddhist. No, I'm just a thinker, and a very skillful surgeon, orthopedic surgeon. And we had wonderful conversations with him about, spiritual matters. And that was quite an eye opener for us, because we suddenly found, we're people on a journey. And if we've got a heart that's open to God, we will find God. These people will find God. And so
the sensitivity
people are seeking.
A sensitivity, as you're saying there, Noel, that Christ would have heard and seen in the Spirit. It's God that does the conversion, isn't it?
Yes,
we're just conduits.
Work of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Because you can talk and you could convince someone to believe what you believe, but unless there is that work of the Holy Spirit, that heart change, it'll just go the way of all other things, and it'll be something you were into.
Yeah. We're going to stop for some more music, and we'll be back with Noel and Tricia right after this.
With you while you cry, no reason to tell me why. Don't fear the tears that may fall. You don't need a reason to call. Let's take.
And if you've just tuned in, this is The Art of Living on Cross Rhythms 96.3 FM, fireside chat with a young couple. Noel and Tricia Richards, been around, certainly birthed in Plymouth in the early days, back in late 70s and 80s, still as young as ever. And guys, you've been on the music scene for years, and poetry and the creative arts and stuff, but you're also doing a podcast, Noel, with a bit of humor in it.
Yeah, that's right. I just had this idea of a podcast, which I've entitled Confessions of a Worship Leader, because I realized in all these years, 40 plus years of traveling around the UK, Europe, and further afield, I've probably been in some very interesting, humorous situations. So the idea was to basically do something that would make people smile. Some of the daft things that I've encountered in all my travels, some of the funny things that I've done as well, maybe slightly irreverent things I've done over the years, but also to look at some of the things that we believe in and maybe examine those things. My first one was, I stopped going to church. That was my first podcast, which is like shock horror. What's Noel going to say about this? And I explained that basically, we don't go to church. We are the church. And if we see a meeting as being church, then we're missing the point. That church is community, church is shared life, churches, we're involved with one another, we're caring for one another, discipling one another. So I expanded, but it's that kind of idea, taking some of the things that we have and examining them, looking at things like, when is Jesus coming back? Because people talk about all of that, but just examining that from a non-religious point of view, maybe slaying a few sacred cows along the way. And that was the idea, really.
And there's a sense of freedom, isn't it? I mean, as you get on in age, I know for Kerry and I, like we said before, it's not the physical age. It's the good news of the gospel is there is a freedom. There is a peace. There is a sense that only God can give you a value, an identity. And it actually does get better, but it doesn't automatically mean that the circumstances get better. This is the essence of the faith. Because when you think of the, brothers and sisters in the persecuted church, like Iran or, North Korea, etc., they've got such an intimacy with God that despite the difficulties, they're still there.
Yeah, and I think they are in a situation where they experience a church life that's very different to our own in the non-persecuted world. And I found as I was doing these initial podcasts that I was getting some feedback from people that are in a similar situation to ourselves. They've been in a church community all their lives, but they suddenly realize this is not working. We need much more than this. You know, they don't want to be in a system. They don't want to they don't want to tick that box anymore. They actually want something that's living, that's vibrant.
I mean, it's probably more relational.
Yes,
sort
and
of help one another with the, like you were saying, Chris, with the realities of life. I mean, bad stuff happens to good people. One of the poems I wrote in the last couple of years, it starts off with, "Where is God when the lightning strikes?" Because lightning strikes in life. I mean, we have family members who have, suffered bereavement and great illness, whose life plans have not gone accordingly. And I think we are looking to sort of write songs, write poems that will help people realize that we're all just walking with a limp. Brennan Manning's great.
Brennan Manning, the Ragamuffin Gospel.
Man.
Absolutely.
He was very open about his alcoholism. He was always an alcoholic. That was something he wasn't healed from.
No.
And was a great stress to him. But the whole thing of it's very current, isn't it? Mental health. And we've looked at some of those things. One of our songs, "Quiet My Soul," really addresses that. Cries out to God. Speak to me, help me. So those. Yeah,
and just you reminded me when you were just saying that, Tricia, about Brennan Manning, but also another guy that was to me was a legend is a guy called George Verwer, who founded this global organization called Operation Mobilization. And I always kept in touch with George over the years. I did the Love Europe events, and it's funny, there were times when I'd meet George in an airport lounge. He was on his way somewhere and I was going somewhere else. And the last time we were physically together was actually in a large church in Toronto, in Canada, several years ago. And I was shocked when he stood up in front of this crowd of people preaching and said, "Well, as you all know, I've always struggled with lust." And I thought, George, that is quite honest. But I loved the fact that he was honest.
It was truth, wasn't it?
It was truth. And just before he died, he just died a few weeks ago. And I remember getting his newsletter and he just said, "Hey, don't pray for me to get healed. Just pray that it won't be too painful because I know where I'm going. I've lived a good age and I'm ready to go." And I love guys like that, the reality. So a true legend.
Well, listen, I want to get people, especially with social media today, to be able to connect with you and your music. And so we're going to stop and have another track from Noel and Trish, but we'll be back with the final part of this week's program right after this.
What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms,
And the final part of The Art of Living with Noel and Tricia Richards on The Art of Living. And guys, lovely to shoot the breeze with you. Just it is a fireside chat. You never really know where it's going. And but how can people connect? Your podcast and your website, Noel? And obviously we've got to get to the point where we can put this up on screen for the podcast we do, but we're not really there yet. We're still the team are. We've got too much to do, and the team's a bit small. So, but anyway, so website.
Yeah, well, I've got my own website, which is noelrichards.com, which really, looks at I suppose, the legacy of what we've done over the years, our songs, our various concerts and things like that. So that's very simple, noelrichards.com. And then we've got our own website, which you can access with two addresses, actually. There's noelandtricia.com. And that's
Tricia, Tricia.
Yeah, Tricia, noelandtricia.com. Or another link that we have, it's called the emigres.com, will take you to the same website, and that gives you all the latest stuff that we've been doing, songs about life, love, and spirituality.
I would imagine, Noel, Tricia, that if you go on one link, it leads you to the other, because I'm sitting on from media, I think, well, noelrichards.com, that's it. You'll get all the rest, presumably.
Yeah, there's cross-pollinization. Is that
whatever it is.
Cross whatever it is. And so if the simple is go to noelrichards.com and you can find everything there. And, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook.
Lovely.
So just do a search of the names and you'll find us.
Well, guys, it's been a real joy to just shoot the breeze with you. And thank you for giving your time, everything else.
Thank you.
We'll pray that you just continue to expand in the fruitfulness and influence of the ministry.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. God bless.
Thank you.